The year is 105 BC. Rome, mistress of the Mediterranean, seems invincible, having dominated for 2 centuries. Carthage is no more. Its ruins smolder under Roman fire, its memory erased. Greece has fallen, and its treasures now belong to Rome. The Iberian Peninsula is pacified. Numantia was razed after years of defiance. Rome's legions fly from the Atlantic to Asia Minor. The Republic seems eternal, destined to rule forever. But beneath the marble, the Republic is rotting as the Optimates cling to tradition and power. The plebeians, hoping for reform, clash with aristocrats. Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus were murdered for daring to challenge this power. The countryside empties. Small farmers lose their land to wealthy estates worked by slaves. Rome's legions, once citizen militias, are now filled with desperate men, their loyalty shifting. The generals, not the Senate, become the focus of their loyalty, signaling a seismic shift in Rome's future. But Rome's next enemy isn't a polished civilization. It comes from the cold northern lands of the Cimbri and Teutones. Their origins are mysterious. Ancient writers can't classify them. Were they Celts or Germans? In the late 2nd century BC, they left their homeland, seeking better lands after floods and famine. The migration was unprecedented, hundreds of thousands, not just warriors, but families, cattle, and wagons. They first meet Rome in 113 BC at Nura in Noricum, and they annihilate a Roman force. Rome is stunned. These unknown tribes defeated a legion and didn't vanish after their victory. They roam Gaul, humiliating Roman armies, fueling an old fear from the Gaulish sack of Rome in 390 BC. Rome sends 2 men to stop them, 2 commanders whose pride would tear the Republic apart. Maximus, a novus homo, represents hope for the plebeians, but to the Optimates, he's an upstart. Quintus Servilius Capio, a proud aristocrat, believes only noble blood can defend Rome's traditions. Capio and Maximus command nearly 100,000 men. Together they might defeat the invaders, but unity is impossible. Capio rejects Maximus's authority, and their camps are separated by a river, with distrust growing between them. The Cimbri king, Borix, watches. He knows the Romans are divided, and he prepares to strike. The Romans fail to unite, and the Cimbri exploit the opportunity. Maximus's officer, Marcus Aurelius Scaurus, is captured by the Cimbri, but refuses to join their ranks. The battle begins, and Capio, acting impulsively, crosses the river without Maximus's approval. Capio's men advance, and the Cimbri spring their trap. The Romans hold for a moment, but the Cimbri press on with relentless force. Capio's army falters, legionaries panic, retreating toward the river. Capio abandons his men, and the retreat becomes a rout. Maximus watches in horror from across the river as his fellow Romans are torn apart. The Cimbri regroup, crossing the river to attack Maximus's camp. Maximus's camp is fortified, but morale is shattered after watching Capio's army fall. The attack is swift and overwhelming. The Romans are outnumbered and disoriented. The Cimbri push through the gates, and chaos reigns. Some Romans fight to the death, but the Cimbri's sheer numbers overwhelm them. The battle is a slaughter, with Romans killed by spears, axes, and sheer weight of numbers. The river runs red with Roman blood, and the remnants of the army flee. The number of dead is staggering, perhaps as high as 112,000 Romans. The survivors flee to Massilia, carrying with them the memories of horror and defeat. The news of the slaughter reaches Rome like a thunderclap. The Senate trembles. For the first time in centuries, Rome's survival seems in doubt. Mothers and fathers beg the gods for the return of their sons. The Senate is paralyzed, with its old traditions and power structures failing. Capio returns to Rome, not as a hero, but as a disgrace. The people demand answers, and Capio faces punishment for his failures. Maximus, too, is disgraced. His caution in battle has achieved nothing. The Senate turns its eyes towards someone else, someone proven in war, Gaius Marius. Marius, though a new man, rises to the top of Roman politics. Marius is a proven general, known for his victories in North Africa. In the wake of Arausio, Marius is granted supreme command to save Rome. He reforms the army, opening it to the capite censi, the poorest citizens. Marius professionalizes the army, transforming it into a standing force. Soldiers become loyal to Marius, not Rome, and that will change Rome forever. Marius's reforms create a new military machine, and soon the legions are a force to be reckoned with. The power of Rome shifts from the Senate to the generals. The loyalty of the legions is now tied to the men who command them, not the Republic itself. Marius's reforms set the stage for future conflicts, as soldiers fight not for Rome, but for their generals. The seeds of civil war are planted. Marius's legions crush the Teutones and the Cimbri in 102 and 101 BC, restoring Rome's military dominance. Yet the republic that emerges is different. The legions are stronger, but loyalty is now personal. Marius's reforms, though successful, have changed the very nature of Rome's military power. Rome's political system is now on shaky ground, with generals holding too much power. As Marius's legions conquer, the Republic's foundations begin to crack. The lesson of Arausio is clear. Rome's greatest enemy was not the barbarians, but itself. Marius's victory over the tribes marks a turning point, but it's also the beginning of Rome's decline. Rome, once united in its purpose, is now divided by ambition and personal rivalry. The rise of generals like Sulla, Pompey, and Caesar will tear the Republic apart. The Senate's refusal to adapt has created a power vacuum, one filled by men of ambition. In the years to come, the Republic will struggle to maintain control over its own armies. Sulla, Pompey, and Caesar all marched in the footsteps of Marius, each a general with loyal legions. Sulla, who would later march his legions into Rome itself, igniting the First Civil War. Pompey, the great general, who used his military fame to dominate Roman politics. And then there was Julius Caesar, who would cross the Rubicon, sealing the fate of the Republic. These men, the future of Rome, would follow Marius's path, where military loyalty had become personal, not to Rome, but to the commander. Marius's reforms created an army that would shape Rome's future, but it also made Rome vulnerable to internal conflict. What started as a desperate measure to save the Republic became the seed of its destruction. Marius's victory over the Cimbri and the Teutones ensured his place in history, but it also laid the groundwork for future turmoil. The shift in military power would echo through history, eventually leading to the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire. With Marius's reforms, soldiers fought not for the Senate or the Republic, but for their generals, for land, and for rewards. The loyalty of the legions became the greatest asset of the generals, but it also became their greatest weapon. Marius's influence and reforms would lead to a new era in Roman history, where military power trumped political tradition. But the republic that emerged from these changes was no longer the same. The balance of power had shifted, and Rome could never go back. The generals who rose to power after Marius, including Sulla and Caesar, would shape the course of Rome's history in ways no one could have predicted. The Senate's inability to maintain control over the legions would eventually lead to the collapse of the Republic. But even in the darkest moments, the ambition of men like Caesar would fuel the flame of Rome's legacy. The events of Arausio, the disaster that could have destroyed Rome, became a defining moment in the Republic's history. From that point forward, the Republic would never be the same. The rise of military leaders over the Senate marked the beginning of the end. But despite the internal chaos, Rome's legacy was far from over. The empire was just beginning. Sulla, Pompey, and Caesar would pave the way for Augustus, who would finally bring the Republic to its knees and crown himself emperor. The Republic had failed, but in its place the Roman Empire would rise, reshaping the world for centuries to come. The reforms of Marius, although born out of necessity, had changed the very foundation of Roman society. Rome's legions would no longer serve the Republic. They would serve the men who commanded them. The fall of the Republic was inevitable once the legions became tools of individual ambition rather than the collective will of the people. Sulla, Pompey, and Caesar each played their part, but none of them could have foreseen the lasting impact of Marius's reforms. In the end, it was not the strength of the legions, but the unity of Rome that was destroyed. The Senate's traditions had given way to ambition, and Rome would be forever altered. As Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he symbolized the final collapse of the Republic and the birth of the Empire. The seeds of civil war were sown by Marius's reforms, and by the time Caesar took power, the Republic was already a shadow of its former self. Rome's military strength, once the pride of the Republic, had become its greatest liability. Caesar's rise was a consequence of Rome's internal divisions, a culmination of years of political unrest. But even as Rome transitioned into an empire, the spirit of Marius's legions lived on. Augustus would establish the empire, but the lessons of the Republic's fall were not forgotten. Marius's military reforms would influence not only the empire, but also the very nature of leadership and loyalty within it. The transformation of the Roman military marked a new era where generals held the power, not the Senate. Rome's greatest strength, the unity of its people, had crumbled under the weight of personal ambition and military might. The legacy of Marius is one of both triumph and tragedy. He saved Rome from external threats, but he also unwittingly set in motion its internal destruction. As the empire expanded, the Roman legions became an unstoppable force, but the Republic's ideals faded into history. From Marius's reforms came the empire that would shape the world for over 500 years. Yet the Republic's fall was a reminder that no great empire lasts forever, and internal division can bring down even the mightiest. Marius's vision of a professional army may have saved Rome, but it ultimately led to its downfall. The rise of generals like Caesar, Sulla, and Pompey, each with their own ambitions, ultimately spelled the end of the Republic. The story of Rome's transition from Republic to Empire is one of power, ambition, and the consequences of division. Marius's reforms changed the face of Rome, but they also left it vulnerable to the very forces that would tear it apart. In the end, Rome's collapse was not caused by external enemies, but by the failure of its own political system to adapt. The rise of Julius Caesar and Augustus sealed the fate of the Republic and the dawn of the Roman Empire. The empire that followed would endure, but the ideals of the Republic were lost to time. The Republic may have fallen, but the story of Rome's rise and fall would shape history for millennia to come. From the ashes of the Republic, an empire was born, but in that birth was the death of Rome as it had once been. Rome survived, but it was no longer the Republic of old. It was something entirely new, with a new set of rules and a new destiny. The rise of the Roman Empire was inevitable, but the fall of the Republic will always serve as a lesson. When personal ambition outweighs the greater good, even the greatest empires can fall. Rome may have endured, but it was never the same after the fall of the Republic. The battle for Rome's soul was over, and the empire emerged from its ashes. But at what cost? Rome's history is one of greatness, but also one of internal struggles and eventual transformation. The Republic is gone, but its legacy will forever echo through history. The rise and fall of Rome serves as a warning for all great powers. Internal strife can be just as deadly as external threats. Rome's greatest enemy was not the barbarians, but its own hubris and political failure. The story of Rome's collapse is a lesson in the fragility of even the greatest empires. Rome may have survived, but it was forever changed, and its legacy would be shaped by the empire that followed.